Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kayla Williams, and I'm a 3L at Tulane Law and an avid Sports Law Society member and fan. And I am proud to introduce this afternoon's Sports Law panel. It'll be moderated by 2L DJ.
How are y'all? So great having y'all here this week. It's been great to see all the beautiful Black faces around campus. Super excited that I was chosen to do this. We've got three great panelists here today. Thank you all for being here and taking the time to speak to everyone and share a bit about your experiences. So as Kayla said, I'm a 2L. I'm from Baton Rouge. Very excited to be a part of the sports law program. Professor Feldman, you've done great so far. So I'm really excited to be here, but without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you all. We have D'Amica Fields here. We have Nina King, and we have Mr. Brandon Harrell. So I'm going to let them kind of tell you all a bit about their story, because I think they can do better than I can. So I guess we can start with Brandon.
Great, thank you, DJ, and good afternoon, everyone. Good to see everyone and to be back on campus and at the law school. My name is Brandon Harrell. I currently serve as Vice President and Deputy General Counsel for the 2028 Olympic and Paralympic Games, which will be back in the U.S. for the first time in 32 years and will take place in Los Angeles. Prior to joining the 2028 Olympics, I was in the NBA with the Philadelphia 76ers as VP of Legal and Business Affairs, and before that with the Seattle Seahawks as Director of Legal. My career commenced at a law firm in DC, where I had the opportunity to work on in arbitration, the New Orleans Saints buying scandal matter, where we represented Commissioner Bob Tagliabue as he heard the appeals for the Saints players during that matter. But nice to see everyone, and look forward to the panel.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is D'Amica Fields. I currently serve as counsel of global sports marketing at New Balance. One of my side jobs is also serving as general counsel for the Black Sports Business Symposium. And so I have been at New Balance for 2 years. I work on all of our sports matters, so from contracting for teams, individual athletes, or team sports, and managing contracts with like MLB, NFL, NBA. Before New Balance, I was at the Minnesota Vikings for 4 years, which is where I started right out of Tulane as a summer intern after I graduated, and then worked my way up there, chief of staff for Kevin Warren, and then became associate counsel. And that's also where I met Brandon. So that's a quick kind of tour of my pathway, but I'm really happy to be here and to speak with you all this afternoon.
Good afternoon. I am Nina King. I am Vice President and Director of Athletics at Duke University. I have been in my current role for about 18 months, but I've been at Duke for 15 years. Prior to Duke, I was at Notre Dame, where I did my undergrad, and I was the director of compliance. And so moving from Notre Dame to Duke, I tried quickly to figure out how to get out of NCAA compliance. And so began at Duke as chief of staff, and then obviously kind of moved up from there. At Duke, we have 27 varsity programs, 750 student athletes. We also have recreation, club sports, intramurals, physical education, and we also oversee the university golf course. So a lot of moving pieces, but absolutely love my job.
Love that golf course too. So the way that this is going to work, we have a few broad topics that I wanted to cover today. So we'll go through those, and then I'll open it up to the rest of you all for questions. So the first line of questioning is really about how you all found your path to sports law and where you are in the world of sports today. So I guess I'll start with Nina, if that's okay. Yeah. So did you come to Tulane with this not specific career path in mind, but broadly speaking, a career in sports?
I did. I have to first start by saying I'm the most unathletic person working in sports ever. I did not play sports growing up. Obviously didn't play in college. And so now here we are. As I mentioned, I did my undergrad at Notre Dame. So when I was there, I kind of felt like everybody was really pretty sporty. So I got into sports by being a student manager. and did that for 3.5 years during my undergrad career. And so when I finished there or finished undergrad, I interned in the athletic department there. I was an accounting major, so I interned in the business office to see if I liked those careers. I did. So then I went to the NCAA, did an internship in finance there for a year. And then I came here for law school. So I came here knowing that I wanted to go back into collegiate athletics. Wasn't quite sure what, if it was back to a campus, if it was back to the NCAA. My summers that I was here, I went and worked at Nike in the legal department out in Beaverton, Oregon, and quickly realized corporate sport was not for me. So when I finished here, timing, a job opened up back at Notre Dame in the compliance office. That was kind of the natural fit for lawyers going into collegiate athletics to start in compliance. And so that's how I ended up there. I do have to say it was kind of, it was nice while I was here in school to not be worried about what firm I was going to go to, or kind of trying to figure out what the practicing law path meant for me. I knew from day one when I got here that I was going to be looking to go into collegiate athletics.
Thank you. Yeah, that's really cool. Damika.
I also came knowing I wanted to do sports, so I got my sports law certificate. And I don't know if I still use it or ever use it, but I did get it. And so I worked for 2 years after I graduated from Howard University, and I majored in business at Howard. I knew eventually I would go to law school. I just didn't know when. And as I worked in Memphis, I traveled a lot through Louisiana, including rural Louisiana and New Orleans, and fell in love with the city. So when I decided I wanted to go to school for sports and leave my job, which everyone was kind of freaking out about, it was like, I'm going to go to a school that specializes in sports and has internships and alumni where I can really tap into their networks. And I came, and blessed that it really worked out. I did 2 sports internships while I was here, one summer for the Saints, and then one for the NBA Retired Players Association in Chicago. And then, like I said, after 3L, I graduated, took the bar here, and started as an intern with the Vikings, and it just happened to work out. So I came knowing what I wanted. It doesn't always work, and there's different paths, but as you can see from us up here, but it did happen to work out.
Awesome.
So I did not come to Tulane with a focus on sports law, and I've been asked this question before, but it was when I was speaking to the Sports Law Society, and I looked at Gabe and he said, tell your story. So I didn't come with a focus on sports law. My undergrad degree is in chemical engineering. I actually came with a focus on energy and environmental law, and was taking primarily all energy and environmental classes. Ended up going to a law firm in DC where I was practicing in the energy and environmental law group. And then one evening, a partner came by and said, hey, would you be willing to help with the matter for the NFL? And I said, of course, that sounds exciting, and we'll love to work on it. And it happened to be, as I mentioned in my intro, at the time, a pretty high profile case, which was an arbitration between the NFL players and the NFL Players Association based upon the New Orleans Saints bounty scandal matter, where the Commissioner Goodell at the time suspended a number of players for the Saints and appointed Paul Tagliabue, the former commissioner, to hear the appeal. And so I was able to serve as counsel to Paul Tagliabue and brief him on the CBA, his scope and rights in the CBA, which really put me in a position I was in the room meeting with NFL attorneys, NFL Players Association attorneys, which eventually led me to meeting the general counsel of the Seattle Seahawks, who eventually hired me as a junior lawyer on his team. So that's my journey, the non-traditional route. So I'm glad we had a chance to hear kind of all the different paths, because it's a question, at least I know for the students and the more junior lawyers in the room, is, hey, kind of what's your journey, and is there a path to get there? There are a number of ways to get there, and Damika, I know, can speak towards it. When we used to have our NFL club council meetings, and as well, we did the same in the NBA. You go around the room, everyone has a different journey, different paths. So there are a lot of different routes to get there. But Tulane does have an excellent program. Professor Feldman is known nationally. Everyone who I meet is always like, Professor Feldman, and we're in the sports law program. So it is an excellent program to be part of, which can really set you apart in the sports field.
And I will say real quickly, CDO, I got all my jobs through CDO, and I know sometimes you talk to law students at various schools, and there's different level of fandom over your CDO, but I did get my jobs through CDO, so it did help me, and I think working with CDO can be beneficial.
Yeah, so Brandon's answer sort of led me into my next question. I have an idea of like who the mentor may be on campus, but was there a particular mentor or experience that kind of gave you that light bulb moment of, I think I really want to do this? I know I'm still in law school, so I know a lot of really successful people have kind of pointed to it. Yeah, this is when I really thought that this is the path that I want to go down. So I just want to know if you all had a mentor that kind of helped you, guide you there, or an experience like Brandon just described.
Happy to start. So my mentor was at my law firm, gentleman who was the managing partner at the time named Ben Wilson. He happens to also be Russell Wilson's uncle, but he was the person who brought in the matter to the firm. And so we used to always talk, and part of it was building that relationship. And it didn't just start that day. He didn't randomly pick me, but I had a couple of years of being a mentee of his, expressing my interest in sports, late nights, evenings, where we'd be talking about Russell's stats and other related matters. So it was more targeted when the matter did come through the door for him to say, hey, do you want to be part of this? Do you want to work on it? Because I know where your interest lies, and this could actually take your career in a different direction.
I don't think I had any mentors. I don't know if I was asleep one night and a dream came, right? I just knew I wanted to do this. I wanted to work in sports. I was going to go to law school, and it was going to have to work out, and thank God it did. I will say starting my career at the Vikings and under Kevin Warren was really, really beneficial, just learning under him, working with him. He's bounced around now at the Bears, but I know I always have him in my back pocket, and just for those first 4 or 5 years working for him and seeing how the business runs, I think was vital to me, like just taking off my career, so.
And before you jump in, that's a great point about Kevin and others. So I think there are different stages within your career for mentors. And, I was sharing with a friend more recently that, it's funny, you kind of look at it and you realize, hey, at least I've been out of law school for now, I was talking to Carrie about this, I think it's 12 years now, 11, 12 years, time is flying. But you're in a phase, you are in a phase where you can serve as a mentor and advocate to others. And even Kevin, who D'Amica mentioned, became a mentor of mine once I got into the sports field. And, when the Vikings would come play the Seahawks, he'd take me to dinner every Saturday night and start drilling me about what I need to learn about revenue generation, about P&L statements, and how to really expand the scope of your knowledge from within the industry. And so I would always, to add to this element of where you're going, but having mentors at different stages is important, but also being a mentor yourself to others and paying it forward. As I was just sharing with Judge Roby, is really important as well, because I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for people doing it for me.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Thank you.
So my mentor in the business is my predecessor actually at Duke, who was the athletic director at Notre Dame. And so when I graduated, I worked in his office, and that's where we formed a professional relationship. And then every job after my intern year in the Notre Dame athletic department was due to him. I never wanted to be an athletic director until about 18 months ago. I said, okay, maybe I'll try. So my career journey wasn't, I want to do what he does. Rather, I want to learn the business, how he teaches it to me. I am the 31st person to have worked for him to become an athletic director. And that doesn't include his children. He has 2 that are ADs. So he's one of the best. And I wanted to stay working with him as long as I could. It's important to note, he is an older white man, but there aren't many people who look like me in my business, doing, at the very top of the leadership post. But it should be noted that everywhere he went, he hired the first Black head coach. He was athletic director here at Tulane. He was the athletic director at Maine. He was the athletic director at Arizona State, and then Notre Dame and Duke. And so I think it's really important to find those people who can mentor you. And while there isn't, as I mentioned, a lot of people who look like me, find the ones that really place a critical priority on advancing women and people of color. And I was so fortunate to be able to find that man in my career who was able to advocate for me and champion me. And every job I've had now is because of Kevin White.
Yeah, and I think we also mentioned learning the business, and I think that was really important for all of us, finding someone who will pour into you. I think we all probably have a lot of students or younger attorneys reach out, and then, people start giving you the title mentor, but finding someone who will pour into you and teach you that knowledge about the business that it's difficult to learn in just like a one-off conversation, but you're constantly in communication, learning through the different avenues that they're going through and the different, I guess, like issues that come up with them, and they're teaching you how they're guiding their companies through. I think that's really, really important.
Yeah, no, that's really good advice. One thing that I know we hear a good bit sometimes, I've heard it at least, is a lot of individuals are like, I think you should, go get some firm experience and then maybe come back to me. Do y'all really subscribe to that? It doesn't sound like y'all do, but I just wanted to sort of hear your thoughts on that.
What does everyone look at me first? No, another good question. And I always give the example, again, when I was in the NFL, we had club council meetings, and in the NBA, we had team council meetings as well. And so when you go around the room and you introduce yourselves and meet people, everyone has a different journey and a different path. I mean, but I to be transparent, if you're looking at statistics, I would say about 80% of the room started at a law firm. Out of that 80%, at least 40 to 50 worked at the main big sports law firms, Proskauer, Covington, but you still have half the room where you took different paths and different journeys. Some went straight through without firm experience. Some don't. Some go to firms. Some worked at in-house before. So I don't think you have to fully subscribe to it, but just sharing what kind of the statistics are, I think it's helpful to know. But a big part of it as well is networking in our relationships. At least in my experience, a lot of jobs aren't posted. I ended up hiring a Tulane law student when I was in Philadelphia as an associate counsel, and she was my assigned mentee through the sports law program here. And I thought she was awesome, a rock star. She had no firm experience, but came in and now is thriving at the NFL Players Association. So if that helps answer the question, you don't need firm experience, but I think a lot of people do have firm experience who come in, but it's not required to mandatory.
Gotcha, absolutely.
I would say, because I didn't go to a law firm, if you don't have law firm experience, wherever you go, I think you want to make sure that you're getting trained. And making sure you're able to ask those questions, and someone's taking the time to go over agreements with you or whatever issues you're working on. Someone's going to take the time and walk through it with you. And I think they do that a lot at firms. You have the different level of associates and partners. And when you get in-house, they don't always do that. So sometimes you have to take your career into your own hands and actually make sure you ask those questions and that you're getting the training. And you're not just flying by the seat of your pants, because it's easy to do that, right? It's just like, get the work done. But if you're not getting that training, then I think it will catch up with you further in your career. So you just want to make sure you take that upon yourself to do that.
In my business, you're not going to want to go from a firm into college athletics, because collegiate athletic administrators are not getting paid what your reading coaches are getting paid. So it's going to be a huge disparity. I also think it's pretty hard to cut the line in college athletics. And so if you're very rarely coming in as an experienced, potentially practicing attorney as all of a sudden a deputy athletic director. It's typically people, at least for us, that have grown up in the pipeline. We're trying to hire young folks in entry-level jobs and really focus on helping develop their careers and rewarding them and growing their careers with us. Not to say that it certainly doesn't happen, but again, you would have sticker shock if you went from an experienced practicing attorney all of a sudden into a entry level or mid-management job in college athletics.
Yeah. I'll say for the leagues, you might also have sticker shock if you go from a firm to one of these in-house teams. So
that's how they get you. Going off of that, I know and I recognize how lucky we are at Tulane to have all the experiences and classes. Not many schools have a sports law certificate. Are there any particular experiences or classes that you all recommend for students to further their career if they're looking to get into sports law? We can start with Nina this time.
I was ready to answer.
There you go. Well, I mean, the sports law certificate for me, it was great because here's what you're going to take for each year, and so I could kind of check those boxes. But they were all wonderful classes applicable to what we're doing now. Labor and employment law, tax, property, First Amendment. I mean, all of them. So great. So again, there is no kind of prescriptive set of classes I would recommend that you take to become a collegiate athletic director.
I don't know if there's any specific class that I took. If there's a contract drafting class now, I wish we had one, we didn't, but if there is one that you could take, I would definitely strongly recommend you taking that. And I think there was a negotiation class we took 3L year. I don't know if that's the time to take it if you really want to learn, because it was the last semester, but I do still use some of those tactics we learned in that class now. So those are the two classes. But I will say with the certificate, it was great just taking classes where I was interested in what we were learning about, and the different cases that we would talk about that I would pay attention to just because I was interested in sports. That kept me more engaged in the class, especially as you continue throughout law school, and by the end you are a little tapped out. So I do recommend the certificate. Professor Feldman, highly recommend.
I agree with everything that's been said, but contract drafting is one I always share. I mean, it's I think very important to the skill set and what we do day to day. A lot of the work we do is transactional work. So having that base skill and that base foundation will serve you well within the industry. But I think a lot of industries, if you decide to ever practice in-house, which at least with a lot of sports teams, leagues, and others, it's in-house. So you're applying the industry to the work and business and to the law. So contract drafting is very important.
Yeah, we have a transactional boot camp now too. It's really cool. So we have a lot, at our disposal. So really cool. And it sounds like y'all are really good about this next question. I know myself and some of my classmates, I know how competitive it is just being in law school in this day and age. And, everyone's getting their big law offers. And, if you're going into a career in sports, it's, the timeline's a little bit more chaotic. So how did you all, and I don't know if you all, ever considered firm life or anything like that. It doesn't sound like it was too difficult for y'all to keep your eyes on the prize. But how did you all manage, keeping your eyes on what you wanted to do instead of being, persuaded by, seeing what your other classmates were being paid or what they were doing, where they were going? I think that's something that a lot of law students today struggle with. So I just wanted to hear you all's thoughts on that. And Tamika, we can start with you.
I was thinking, I was like, it's my turn.
Yeah.
Okay. I will first say that I don't think there's anything wrong with big law. I remember being in the sports law group, and a lot of people were just turned off by big law. I was never turned off by big law. It just wasn't something, or law firms at all. It just wasn't something that was in my path. I would say don't neglect any path or just shut down any potential path right away. I think you explore all of your options and see, which one works for you. That's why there's internships available. So if you intern at a firm, you actually have that experience, and then you can decide whether you like it or not, versus just saying, it doesn't seem like I'm not working for a team, so I don't want to work in a firm, right? I don't think that's a good option, but I would say, money matters. So you got to live. So sometimes you can't take that $10 an hour job out of school because you need to pay bills and help maybe your family at home. So I would just say, keep the end goal in mind, but just don't take your blinders off, right? Take your blinders off, keep the end goal in mind, but also understand there's different paths to get where you want to go. And as long as you're networking, like Brandon said, along the way, you will find your way into sports. It can be difficult, but you will find your ways. Doors are always opening. I think just keep your priorities in order as well.
Brandon?
It's a good question. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, there's so many different paths that you can take. I mean, it's not mandatory that you go to a firm. I did. I thought the training, if I hadn't gone to the firm, I may not be in sports right now. In the cases I was able to work on, working on the NFL matter, opened a lot of doors. Now, there are other routes as well where some people, you do take that kind of pay cut out of school if you keep your eye on a prize and stay focused and work your way up. And there are a lot of, general stories or case studies out there on people who, started out as an intern or, just took a job to get in with an organization and are now either GMs or presidents of teams and running some of the bigger franchises within sports. And so it's possible in both avenues. So I wouldn't worry about necessarily being discouraged, provided that you can do it, but also I always share with people, look for fellowships, look for other opportunities. I think one of the bigger things that I look at with, we're doing fellowship programs, whether now it's with the Olympics or when I was with the other leagues, is, finding opportunities for diverse students, because to the point, if not everyone can afford the $10 an hour job right out of law school or or during the summer. So how do we help get top tier caliber minority students in a lot of these roles? Well, let's create a fellowship. If we're going to have a diverse, fellowship or internship, how are we funding it? And so I've sat on the diversity and inclusion committees for organizations, but even now with the Olympics, if we're going to have a diverse intern, and so spoke up and said, let's fund it. Let's provide a decent compensation and salary so that they can, we can get some good candidates who can afford to, where I'm at, live in Los Angeles, which is expensive, and provide housing, because I think that's important. Otherwise, you're going to see a lot of top talent not get these opportunities, frankly, because to the point of your question, either you can't afford it, whereas that leaves it to the wealthier children or kids who can. So really trying to look at the root of the issue and solve it is key. But I would say try to find those avenues and opportunities, because now there are some fellowships out there, rotational programs that the NFL league office and others do that may allow you to get that experience to get your foot in the door out the gate.
The only other thing I would add is for the current law students in the room to utilize the resources here. As you can see, I graduated a lot earlier than you all, and administration has changed over since I was here, but I just didn't find that the law school was terribly well equipped and career services were well equipped to help me, because I felt like I was in somewhat of a unique niche trying to find a college sports job. But I can say it has grown so much, and there is so much emphasis on the sports law program and career services and helping students who are interested in sport. I've just watched the mentorship programs build over the last several years. And as a graduate, I'm very interested in paying it forward. So just continue to utilize the resources that you have here, as well as the networks that are here.
Yeah, no, thank you. And this next question, you all maybe have experienced it or maybe not, or have seen it in practice. Really, how has, your background or who you are as a diverse person of color, how has that helped you in your current role? Like, what unique perspectives do you think that it's offered to you in your role, if that makes sense? Has it assisted you in your job? Maybe, I guess that's what I'm trying to say, or being able to relate to certain people.
It has. I mean, it works in your advantage in certain instances, and if you capitalize off of it, it can help your career, and then it works to your disadvantage. I mean, I've been senior leadership meetings and ownership groups, and where I'm the only Black person in there. You notice that when you look around the room, and for me, part of it is that chip, or that I'm not the diversity hire, qualified and able to resolve these issues and proving that point. But then there's ways that it's worked to your advantage. I mean, the leagues, at least the NFL and NBA, where I've been in, with predominantly African-American athletes. So I just know even in Seattle, a lot of the players, when I was there, a lot of guys, including Marshawn Lynch and others, would be like, yo, what do you do? Kind of in the hallways, and start talking. And they're like, oh, either we don't normally mess with the folks upstairs in the front office because they don't look like us or understand us. But I had that relationship, and some folks, our team president and others started to notice it. That became sort of an advantage for me, where I was able to build a relationship with the players on the team, coaches, and others, where normally there was sort of this divide between front office management and players. And the same in Philadelphia with the 76ers, being able to have that rapport when we had Jimmy Butler and others there, and really get a sense of that relationship and really help you understand the entire organization and the league and the players' perspective, and also having that front office perspective. But it worked both ways, because a lot of the guys would want to pick my brain about what it's like, whether they wanted to get into their post-playing career ownership, or getting equity in organizations, and how that works with the league rules. Or we just have frank conversations. So it went both ways. But in that instance, it certainly helped, because I know a lot of colleagues and others didn't have that relationship with the players and others. So I think it certainly plays both ways, at least in the professional sport.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. I think it's easier as a Black man to Black man versus if you go to one of these teams and it's Black woman to Black man, right? Because overall, a lot of times it's like players, it's just like kind of beware of the business people. But once they, like, okay, what do you do? It's like, oh, you're a Black woman and you're a lawyer. And it definitely was that respect factor. And then okay, we see you. So they're really funny. But having that respect for them and getting to know them, and them having that respect for you, I think it did help, especially with my other colleagues seeing that, and they're like, okay, if she's able to develop these relationships, one will look at the players a different way because they can talk to business people and it's going to be fine. But then also she can help us with some matters that they may not be comfortable coming straight to us with. And so it does help. Like Brandon said, I'm usually the only, even now, I think the only woman in the room, definitely the only Black person a number of times. But at this point, it's been a while. So it doesn't bother me anymore. It's just, for me, it's a platform to represent us well and say, right, we shouldn't be the only, we do good work and we deserve to be here.
Yeah.
Yep. I mean, for me, it's important. We have, as I mentioned, 750 student athletes, and they represent a variety of backgrounds, and they are a very diverse population. And so, you know, for me to be able to represent them and serve them, I embrace my role as a Black woman, and hopefully that you know, we can find some common ground and relate to each other. So it's also helpful. You know, I go into it also when I'm hiring coaches and trying to find the most you know, diverse candidate pool and hopefully hire some diversity into our department. You know, I think being a Black woman, I certainly place a huge priority on that. I'm one of 3 Black women athletic directors in the Power 5. The other 2 are at Virginia and Vanderbilt, and the 3 of us are pretty darn close because we need each other and really rely on each other a lot. So, you know, it can be really lonely. But again, I mean, we seek each other out and find mentorship and fellowship with each other. And I think that enables us to then be able to serve our student athletes.
Yeah. And, you know, that's going to bring me to my next line of questioning. Y'all are leading into it perfectly, so I appreciate it. But, you know, the title of this is Being Black in Sports Law. And clearly, I think that denotes that, you know, and it maybe not in you all's experience, but I think, you know, it's important to address some discrimination in this field. Like Nina said, you know, it's largely dominated by white males, and that's no secret at all. And so and especially for students, and you all are really successful and have gone really far. My first question along this line of questioning is really, how have you all dealt with, you know, any overt or covert forms of, you know, discrimination that you all faced? And it doesn't have to be a particular experience, just how have you dealt with it throughout your career to combat it and keep propelling yourself forward? Because I think that's something that can really get you down, obviously, and, you know, just keep pushing. How have you all dealt with it? I guess we can start with.
Happy to start.
Okay, Brandon, yeah, okay.
Yeah, no, I mean, we're getting into a deep question here, and I think there are different layers to it. And it's synonymous with a lot of industries. I think there's the piece of getting into the industry. You know, how do you get in, you know, when an industry that's been predominantly dominated by white males or nepotism? You know, you have these owners who are billionaires, they hire their friends, kids, and others to run the organization. So how do you get in? I think you are starting to see, you know, that there's, you know, more diverse, well, trying to become more diverse in the front office, but is it more, as I said earlier, is it a diverse hire? And what are you doing once you get into that role as a second layer? Now, how do you get into more of a material leadership position and opportunity? So starting with the first one, I think merely it's, you know, we have to, as you know, me, Nina, D'Amica, we have to pay it forward. I was sharing with Judge Roby earlier, just, you know, that's how the door's opening. My general counsel in Seattle, the Seahawks was, you know, as an African-American male, he hired me. I went to Philadelphia with the 76ers. I hired a minority woman in the position as well. And then continue to who, you know, may hire somebody else and help another friend get on with the Golden State Warriors. So you're starting to see we have to help each other and build that network, which is important. And then the second tier is now, how do you get into more of these leadership positions? How do you become an athletic director? How do you become president of the team or CEO of the organization? Or, you know, for example, the GM? That comes with learning. I mean, so now we are starting to see more minorities in the front office and on its side, but how do you get there? What does it take? How do you learn the entire business? A big part of that is then developing your network, I would say, you know, having conversations with D'Amica and other friends who are at other teams and other clubs. I mean, it's a small industry. And so really learning, hey, what are the ins and outs, or how have you dealt with this issue? How have you dealt with, you know, this employment issue or this sponsorship issue and others, and really building that network. As I mentioned earlier, Kevin Warren, who's now the president of the Chicago Bears, when we would play them with the Vikings, when he was with them in Seattle, again, he would take me to dinner every Saturday night before the game and really just drill me on learning P&L statements, learning certain business aspects, which will help me take that next step in my career. So I think, a big part of it is I'm not going to change the mind of, a billionaire white male owner who's, worth $20 million, has never really had to deal with minorities ever, and probably care less to an extent about diversity hiring, although they may say it to the media, but doesn't reflect it sometimes in the organization. But when you step in and you're able to really know the business, know the role, and have success, you start to get noticed at that point in time. And hopefully we see more minority owners in the future for teams and organizations, which will certainly help. But, to that point, I think your network is important in really getting down to the nitty gritty of learning the business and learning what it takes to take that next step and lead the organization as a whole, so that you're not just, great, we have a diversity hire, check that box, but how do you continue to climb and have success?
Yeah, that's very thoughtful. Thank you.
I would say at the beginning of my career, it was great having Kevin as a mentor. So, I think initially as I started as an intern, you walk into these rooms and you don't feel like you belong, right? When there's executives around the table. So you kind of, like, well, I'll sit in the back, or if there's not enough chairs, you're like, oh, you can take my chair. Like, I'll go get another chair. And he was really big on, like, no, if you're in the room, like, you belong at that table. If someone else needs a chair, they can go get one. Or we'll make sure there are enough chairs, but you always belong at the table. No one sits on the fringe. And so having that for 4 years, now that I deal with a lot of agents, old school agents, white males who have been in the business a long time, and make sure to tell me that, I have developed that confidence from having someone push me to, when they're like, oh, I've had 50 years of experience, and never in my 50 years, so, okay, well, I have 6. And let me tell you, this is what we do, and this is how we're going to do. But you develop that confidence. And so I don't know if it's, it's age, and there maybe is race and being a Black woman. And so all these different things, but I think it's really important, like you said, having those mentors that build that confidence in you and that support around you. So then when you leave, it's like they're kind of like your coaching tree, but when you leave, you have that confidence they enrooted in you. And now I make sure when I bring in my interns or people that work under me, I empower them like I was empowered. So then when they leave, they hire someone else, or they feel like they can walk into the room and be themselves and do their job.
I want to be just like you when I grow up.
Well, I'll give you an example of something that I experienced recently. So unfortunately, one of the reasons why I did not want to become an athletic director was the very public nature of the job. And so back in August, I woke up one Saturday morning and had a flurry of texts and phone calls from my volleyball coach and my volleyball administrator. And so for those of you that might not know the news around Duke athletics, back in August, our volleyball team played at BYU. Our student athletes were, during the match, they heard racial slurs directed towards them. On that team of roughly 20 young women, we have 4 Black women. While they were serving, they heard racial slurs directed at them. They informed the BYU event management staff. Kind of fast forward, the game went on, fast forward, end of the match, there was a discussion around it. And our team went back to their hotel. There was another match the next day. So went back to their hotel, extremely upset, distraught. Again, I wake up Saturday morning and I have the information. And so I talked to our coaches and our team, and our women are just not comfortable playing another match in BYU's gym. The next match wasn't against BYU, but they didn't want to play in their gym. And so this became a, what do we do? And if they're not comfortable, first thing I'm telling them, you don't have to play. You can, we can forfeit the match. We don't have to play. If you want to play somewhere else, we'll find you another place to play. But first and foremost, I was most interested in the well-being of our student athletes. And so we figured that out first and ultimately moved the match to another gym. But then the second piece was working with BYU to address what had happened. And to just kind of fast forward a little bit through it, BYU ultimately came out and said, we investigated and we found no evidence that the incident occurred. And they did that in a very public way. And their investigation, won't get into it, but just certainly didn't cover every base. So in my conversations with our student athletes, they were adamant what they heard and how they felt in the moment. And so now here I am, BYU's put out this very public statement saying this. Here I am, and I feel like I have a lot of eyes on me just kind of in general, but then I know Black Duke is looking at me too. And so what am I going to do here? And there was no question in my mind that I needed to publicly support our student athletes. They told me what they heard, they told me how they felt, and that was all I needed. I don't care what BYU said. And so I made a public statement supporting our student athletes. And then we all moved on. Well, we moved on. The amount of hate mail that I got, the notes that I got, anonymous notes calling me the N-word, and telling me, you know, how could you say these things publicly about our fans? And I'm thinking, well, you're a fan and you have no problem writing me an anonymous note calling me the N-word, and I'm supposed to believe you didn't say it in the match? Are you kidding me? But, you know, I mean, so it just kind of a story to highlight how do we, you know, embrace who we are, support our student athletes, all while doing it very publicly can be very challenging. But in that moment, I had great support from my university president, as well as our Duke community, as we all collectively supported our student athletes. So, you know, these can be horrific moments to experience together. But my message is to not compromise your values and what you believe in, no matter what, public or not. So, oh, somebody wants to tell you something.
No, I remember when that happened, and you know that was really, really tough situation. But this is directed to Nina and D'Amica, so I guess I'll hand this off to you. As a Black woman in the sports world, that, and we've said it multiple times today, it's largely dominated by people that don't necessarily look like you, or they may not respect that women are on the same level, or in my opinion, smarter most of the time than they are. Yeah, I was trained well on my phone. How have y'all combated that? How have you dealt with it? It sounds like y'all, I mean, obviously you all have a ton of confidence, which you should have. So how have you all really combated that in your career thus far to move to where you are?
I think I just shared an example of how I did, and then I'll give you another one. It's also seen as, or the perception is that women can't be athletic directors because women can't do football. Bullshit. So it's about calling people on that, right? I was on a panel at another university, and the panel had a legendary football coach. I think when I was on the panel with him, he was at least 80 years old. So he'd been an old school retired football coach, and the conversation started going towards women can't do football. And so in that moment, I'm thinking, well, what do I do with this? And we're speaking in front of a lot of people. And so, I mean, for me, it's the confidence and embracing who you are. And so I responded to him, and I did say, with all due respect, coach, but, and then we went there, because women can do football. I don't need to be able to draw up practice plans or run the drills or any of that. That's not what being an athletic director and being in football is. So it's again, embracing who you are and owning your confidence and calling people out when the moment is right in a respectful way. But it took me a bit to build up the confidence too. I mean, it takes some time, and I was a shy, pretty introverted person, but you have to grab the moments and speak up when it's appropriate.
Thank you. Mika.
Yeah, I think I kind of touched on it before, but it is like building up that confidence. Before I came to law school, I worked for Ford, and I traveled rural Louisiana. So Shreveport, right? Like not just South, but like Shreveport, Alexandria, like real not diverse. Well, I don't know if I feel safe driving out there now, but I would say I've always been in this area where it's like, I'm going to be maybe the youngest, definitely maybe the only Black person, definitely the only Black woman. You build that confidence to where now it does not bother me, right? I definitely will get on the team's call, and you look at all the pictures and you're like, okay, like this seems correct, right? This seems like typical, I'm not surprised. But I will say it really does not bother me anymore. Like, this is what I'm used to, but I have had people build me up so I don't feel like I don't belong. So it's never like, look at all these people, I don't feel like I belong. Like, how can I be successful here? It's like, okay, it is what it is. Get past all this, right? If you take away my race and being a woman and my age, like, I haven't had 50 years of experience, but I've had what I've had, and I was hired for a reason. I, deserve to be here, and you keep going like that, and it's not like that every day. Some days you're just like, oh, this task is really big. I haven't had experience in this before, but I think you still have to exude that confidence, because if you don't, some people do smell blood in the water. So you gotta like put on a front and you figure it out on the back end, and you do what you need to do to deliver. And then as you continue to deliver, I think you also get more comfortable, because you're like, I can do this. And you all will respect like my work product.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And I'm gonna make this last portion a little bit shorter so we can get y'all some questions. 5 minutes, okay. Well, I'll just ask this one question. And Brandon, you sort of spoke to this, but a lot of professional sports, especially football and basketball, are largely dominated by African Americans. And I just really broadly wanted you all to quickly speak, if you all may, on what do you all think of the current diversity initiatives that professional organizations are, and even collegiate organizations are currently taking part in to make, the boardroom look more like the locker room, is what I called it. So if you all might add, Brandon, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, it touches on a little bit what I shared earlier. I think a lot of the initiatives are more PR and BS under the surface. I always share, if you're going to add that initiative, show me the budget that you allocated for it, because that'll tell me where the money's going towards, and really how can we make an impact, if we don't have a budget for it, or if this is just more of a PR marketing piece. And so I think it's up to those in leadership to really hold our organizations accountable for the diversity initiatives that they're rolling out, to see if they really will make an impact, or is this just more riding the wave of, and we saw a lot in 2020 after George Floyd's death. You saw a lot of organizations making statements, putting out a lot of different things, and then now crickets from some as well, and they haven't really acted on what they set forth. And so for me, when my organization wanted to do something afterwards as well, I raised, are we gonna have a budget behind it? Let's do something, or else I don't want to be a part of it. And because it's not going to be meaningful change, and it's not something that really support our values. And so I think you really have to dig deep into those initiatives and find out, what are they putting behind it, and what are the resources that are being allocated towards it.
Yeah, no, that's really great.
Yeah, I would say the resources are big. Also having support from the top down. So then we announce these initiatives. We hire your chief diversity officer, who's not always necessarily diverse. So that's always also really interesting to me. But we have like all these things. We set up these programs, and then the CEO never talks about it. Sometimes your chief diversity officer, talks about it before they leave after 2 years, right? Because they didn't have the support. So so if no one is talking about it at the top, if it's not in your review, if it's not a hiring manager's review of how many people of color, diverse people they're bringing in, then what are we really doing? We're putting the money maybe behind these programs, or we're announcing these programs, and then nothing is happening. So I'm always sketchy at the league, and I guess in footwear at New Balance, I'm really big in this space, like how do we get to the numbers? But I think also in professional sports, you have the programs that, bring in the coaches, and they sometimes try to bring in your executives. But if you look at the lower ranks in a lot of these teams outside of the coaches, but on the business side and like marketing, events, legal, finance, there's not a lot of diversity. Maybe in some of the Blacker cities, or they may be some diversity, but a lot of them are not. So we want people at the top, but just because you have a Black president, you still may have those 10 people in the front office position. So I think it really is, let's look at our hiring practices and how we can bring people in, and we can pay them, and we can pay them what they're worth. And we don't ask them to take a $50,000 pay cut, right? Because then how can you work in these spaces and not be able to provide or have to get a second job? But I also feel like it's not rocket science, and we all probably answer this question all the time. It's like, why is this so hard? I think it's really getting the people at the top to care, and put action behind it, and get away from just all these programs that have no team.
Yeah.
Yes. don't have much more to add than that. Just this week, Duke Athletics published our DEIMB strategic plan. And so for me, it was very important to be loud about it and put out a press release. And here is our diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging plan with stated goals and actions that we as a department can take. And so put that out there so that we can hold ourselves accountable internally. And a huge part of it is hiring and retention. And it's really important to me to make sure that we do hire and retain the most diverse staff. Again, going back to who we serve, our student athlete population is a very diverse population.
Thank you. Well, so I don't get in trouble with Dean Jupiter, I'm going to open it up for like 2 questions or 3 questions. If you all... Okay. If anyone has any questions for our panelists, now's the time.
Gary Marshall. So from the extraordinary class of 1994, want to say thank you to the panel. Those who know. So I appreciate the feedback. I was also a sports law certificate member, and one of the things that you guys talked about recently was retention and in your hiring efforts. And one of the things that I think about is, as each of you have entered the sports field from different avenues and places, I think about a lot of our coaches and administrators that get hired into high-level, high-visibility roles, but don't seem to get lengthy runways or expected to sort of create, wine from water with, little grape supply and the whole bit. How did you all, I guess, as you moved into your roles, really assess the opportunity to make sure that you would be given a fair opportunity to succeed and not just be deemed a token hire or someone who, the minute things didn't go well, they were going to move you along and bring someone else in?
Yeah, great question. I think it's part of it was part of the network that I had to really learn. The first position I had was more about the opportunity and getting my foot in the door. I didn't know the path to becoming, whether it's the CEO or president of a team or to have more positions of influence until I had others in the leagues who said, hey, let me take you under my wing. Let me, let's learn about it, and you observe. And so I think part of it comes with learning. I think on the coach's side, you also see you start learning by experience as well. I think initially it was probably a lot of excitement to be, like an African-American head coach. But when you realize you were put into a situation where, let's look in Carolina recently with the Panthers, Coach Wilkes is in a position to take over a team that, frankly, halfway through the season and, that was 0-4 at the time, and put in a position to try to turn it around. And we're constantly putting in these positions where, you look at the head coaches, and at least in the NFL, you're not put in a position to win and to succeed. You're not taking over for a team that's ready to really flourish and with the resources behind it. But I think we're all learning that and seeing it, and now it's being called out and putting it out there, calling it out and saying, hey, we're not putting in positions to succeed, and let's look at how we can do that. And I think that applies on both the football or sport operation side as well as the business side. But I think a lot of it's, you have to be the awareness, learning the simple fact that, hey, I'm actually, how do I get into this? Or the position I'm in, it looks like it's just a diversity position or entry level position. How do I get to that seat or get into the room with ownership, where we're briefing ownership on matters or giving presentations to ownership? How do we have a seat at that table and learn from, what it takes to get to that level?
Yeah, I would also say I think networking helps. I know before I joined New Balance, I did the research and went on LinkedIn and found all the Black people that worked at New Balance, and then reached out like, okay, what is it like to work here? Because if I'm going to leave, I know sometimes it looks like the grass is greener, and then you get to the grass, you're like, okay, this is dead, right? Oh, roll dig, right? It's not what I want. So you're jumping again. So I think getting that background, I think of the Texans organization, they just hired another Black man, but the previous Black man was there one season, and it was like, a lot of times we feel like the Black people get hired into these horrible organizations, right? We've never gone to like the Patriots or like a winning team, right? It's always a team we're trying to build up. They just came back from a scandal. And I think that's tough that we always have to be put in those situations to build up a team from the ground because it just burned down. But I think doing the research and knowing what you're walking into, it makes me think of Eric Bieniemy, and maybe he hasn't left, maybe he hasn't gotten hired, or if he did get hired for some of these teams that have been on fire for a while, he turned it down and like, let me stay with my winning organization until a winning team, a position opens up where someone just retired, versus you all telling me like, I'm gonna come in and turn it around and I have 6 months. So like on the business side, I think we can do some research and see like, how was it for the previous person? How is it in that department? And see if you're gonna have that track to be able to learn and make the mistakes that you're going to make and have a supportive boss, or if the boss is not great and, you know, all money is not good money. I don't need to take this position. Let me look for another opportunity where I can grow.
And the scandal piece is important as well on the business side. I think if you look at some of the team president and CEO roles, and they hire a diverse hire after the team has had a public scandal at times. And so coming into the role, learning, okay, what type of authority am I going to have? What type of influence? Or am I just more of a figurehead for the organization as a whole? So I think, again, that experience of learning what's been happening and now how do we take the next step?
Yeah, no, awesome. The Saints could use Eric Bieniemy, by the way.
A lot of teams could.
Yeah. Well, it looks like we've run out of time, but once again, thank you all so much for.
And because we have a program starting right now at 2 p.m., another program for the law school that's being live streamed, we must be Black lawyers on the move. And we must move with alacrity. But I hope you will take a moment on your way to the networking event, which is next. And I'm sorry, we have Michelle here handing out lovely things. Don't forget your schedule today. We have networking at 2:30 in the Lavin Burnick Center, the LBC as we call it here, followed by networking reception, same area. Please go to Market Day. It's on your way to the LBC. Please support our Black-owned vendors. Thank you very much, panel. This is incredible.